Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel, and this time we're gonna be doing something a little bit different. We're gonna go through the process of making this character. I'm gonna mainly explain the different steps. There are gonna be some little bits of time lapse in between, but at the same time mainly it's gonna be an explanation of this whole character. I was thinking that since it's closer to the spooky Halloween season, it would be a good idea to break a little bit from the tutorials around faces and features that I've been doing. Do a small break, talk about this character, so maybe this could help you create your own spooky related characters. And then we're surely in the future we're going to go back to these tutorials that I'm doing, which I have promised to you about the features of the face. So let's deep dive into that. This is a Medusa character that I created some time ago. I posted it on my Instagram and I asked you whether you wanted to have a look, more in-depth look into this character, and that's what we are doing today. Effectively, how you can go about creating a character from imagination and the whole process around that, and how you can end up in this kind of finished result. Let's start first of all with inspiration. So when you want to create such characters, it's a good idea to take inspiration from other artists or maybe from movies or whatever you like. I took some inspiration from other artists. Basically, I have different character refs here that I used. In that sense, I'm gonna quickly zoom in so you can see them. They're quite different to mine, but they're all different versions of the Medusa character from different artists. I found these pictures from Pinterest, so if you kind of know this artist, let me know. I can write them all in the description, but unfortunately I don't know who these people are, but I just like these pictures of this character. For example, this one, I like the many hair and the colors. This one, I really liked the way that they did the snakes. These are different iterations on the character. This is very cool shape design, and this is more on the expression stuff. So the one set of inspiration that I'm looking for is references from maybe from other artists or movies or this kind of stuff, stylized on the character itself. Another set of references I have here is references for style. I think this is from Grecke on the top right. This is from Loish, of course, it's clear. And this is from another artist. I don't remember exactly his name. I'm gonna put his name in the description if I manage to figure it out. But this is kind of the style that I wanted to go for, more like colored style with not so much dark fantasy, let's say, style, but more like colors that pop and more cartoony style for my character. That's why I had these images for inspiration. And of course, the third thing that I want to suggest is, while you are working in such characters, you can have, if you have access to 3D models, even better. I took this one from SketchFab, but it's a good idea if you feel that you are not very well versed in something, for example, like anatomy or hands or the creatures like here, for example, a snake. The best thing is to find references from different angles of your subject, so they can help you to actually design and render the subject. So I used a few angles from that. I'm gonna have also this URL at the description. If you like it, then you can go and see the SketchFab itself. So let's start. How can you go about creating a character from your imagination? So first thing is, you want to make sure you have some basic structure for your design. So the idea is here, this was the first kind of quick sketch that I did for that, and I'm gonna point you into some of the things that I did for this. So one thing that it's clear here, if we have a look, is that I had in mind the perspective while I was designing this character. So the first thing then what I did is I imagined camera angle in my head where the perspective would be something like this. So maybe we're looking a little bit from down up to this character, but not so much. That's why the ear is lower. than the eyes here. So we're having a kind of perspective box that is like this around the character. And as you can see, so that was wrong. And as you can see, the box is kind of slowly going towards the horizontal line, which should be around here. If we imagine, because these lines are going downwards, right? But these lines are going upwards. So mainly we are looking at this character from, maybe the camera is here. Let me clear these things up so I can show you. And maybe put a little bit less here opacity. So the camera is around here, right? So the camera box, if we imagine a camera box, is around here and seeing the character from this side. So first things first is you want to make sure you start with a box, even though that is not showing, or at least have it in mind so you can have correct perspective. And then the next thing is you don't want to go too much into details early on, like, I don't know, designing the hair and all the stuff. But first you want to establish some basic things, for example, like the head shape here that I wanted, right? So it's elongated because I want it to be more like a creature-like thing. Also, I wanted to get down really well the expression. So if we lower the opacity again, if you see, there is kind of a triangle here that creates this expression. So I wanted here to be angry, so I'm gonna do this kind of mask here, right? An angry mask. And then also I wanted here her jaw and her mouth open, like she's kind of shouting at you because she's very angry. And then maybe there is also here in the nose that creates this kind of wrinkle when we are shouting and we are very angry, right? These are the wrinkles here. So if I kind of go lower the opacity here, you see the expression mainly it's focusing on these flows here and the mouth, and also it's trying to elongate the chin so it makes it more exaggerated in terms of the expression. Of course, I'm going for a more cartoony character here, and I'm not going to be completely realistic. I want things to be exaggerated a lot. As we all know, there are no Medusas in real life, so we can kind of make sense of that. Another thing I wanted to point here is already I'm establishing some idea of that her neck, the muscles of her neck are pushing towards this expression. So I'm just having these lines here already. So when you have your basic structure here, right, which is essentially the basic structure is a box here that is curved, of course, because it's a curve. Our head is a curve. Essentially, you have this, then you can go and build on top of it and start going more into details. So let's see the next step from that. The next step is this. As you can see, it's nothing else than the hair on top of this basic structure, right? And the most important thing here is when you are kind of drawing here, and of course we want to imagine the snakes as hair, is that they are believable in terms of where they are growing and how they are flowing. So there are two things to consider here. One is the roots, right? They are starting from here, from here, from here, and even back here. But also, since they are snakes at the same time, we want to make sure that they defy a little bit gravity, because snakes have muscles and they can move. So they're doing this S lines, or they come back in front of here, and this kind of movement. Let me also lower the opacity so it's more clear. So they're starting from this and they're going like that. There is no need to have a specific length or think about some specific stuff. The only thing you need to consider is if the snakes are kind of a little more behind, they should appear a little bit smaller than the snakes that are in front of us, just because of perspective. But also, if you don't do that, it wouldn't be that much of a mistake, because some of your hair can be bigger snakes, some of your hair can be smaller snakes. It's okay. What you want to make sure is that there is the flow of the hair Here, there's the flow of the hair. So they look like hair. There should be quite a lot of hair intermingling with each other. Like this one's right there, they're mingling here, then go behind, and also coming out. Another hair is coming here. So it gives you the impression that there's a lot of snakes, a lot of hair, but at the same time, there's no reason to do 1,000 snake heads. As long as you have a few snake heads coming out, the goal has been achieved, which is that we want to show that she has, hair like snakes. So this is the rough sketch. There are quite a few lines here. As you see, it's totally rough. There is no kind of line art and so on. So what you want to do is either you lower the opacity and then you draw over it and you try to make good lines by following your flow, or what I do sometimes is I will duplicate this layers, then merge them into one layer, and then I will pick up this eraser, which is the knitted eraser from Krita, lower the opacity, and then pass through and actually create a less opaque version of the sketch, and then go over that in the same layer, because I feel sometimes I want to reuse some of the lines. It keeps some of the energy of the sketch that I have, because if I just lower the opacity and just try to make correct lines, sometimes I'm losing the energy of the sketch that I have. And also the goal, as we said in the line art video, if you haven't seen that, go check it out. I would also have it in the description. The whole idea is not to just trace our lines from the rough sketch, but keep our sketch energetic with clean lines. I would definitely suggest that you watch this video if you wanna improve in your line art. So the next thing that I'm doing is I'm creating kind of a more clean sketch, let's call it like that. You see there are still some things here, like from the older lines, but the sketch is much more clear. And I want to talk a little bit about teeth now. As you saw in the first sketch, let's say the base one that we had, you see I've already established a kind of a shape here, like a horseshoe for the actual teeth. So if we imagine the jaw is somewhere around here, right, for this character, and goes like that on the other side, then there is this, let's say, horseshoe shape design or 3D design from the bottom side, and also from the top side there's similarly that, because here's the skull, and then of course it's gonna kind of go like that, right? We know the skull, and then there would be this one, and then there would be the nose and the holes for the eyes and so on. So this is where the teeth are actually joining the skull, right? And based on that diagram, based on that wireframe, the whole idea is we wanna make sure that we actually draw the teeth on top, right? So if we just keep this maybe like lower opacity, and we go back to the clean sketch, if I can find it, okay, clean sketch, all right, let me move it a little bit more down, because we just moved that, all right. And you see the teeth are following the same kind of path. So what you want to do with the teeth is definitely, you don't want to do something like that when you're kind of sketching feet. You don't want to do and try to design every single teeth, right? That would make stuff completely unrealistic, and also would break the whole design. Because if you do this, then immediately you don't have a good picture. You're just putting too much detail on the teeth, and then effectively you're just breaking the whole sensation. What you want to do is create a shape that looks like teeth, and follows this, this specific lines that they are connected to the scalp. So if we wanna do it like that, is as we have this idea of the horseshoe, like we wanna make sure we create teeth like this, and then maybe some of them we are gonna join, but not that much. So we don't wanna make sure, we wanna make sure that it's a continuous shape, right? And here the same, right? And then of course they go inside and we cannot see them. So that's how I design teeth, and I'm making sure that there's not too much lines here, because many lines will just create too much contrast. They won't look realistic, and effectively they will just take the focus away from what we need. So this is all about teeth. And of course the only thing that we did here was cleaning up the lines a little bit and making sure that we look into the different elements for the drawing in terms also of not only shapes but 3D notion, right? So everything, when we are at this phase of the clean sketch phase, is we want to make sure that everything also from a 3D perspective makes sense. It may not seem here, but what I'm thinking is, while I'm doing this the sketches, is I'm thinking how, for example, the different snakes are coming in. That's why you have this thing overlapping here, for example, or this one because it's overlapping here, or this one here, it's overlapping. You see there are quite a few overlaps to show that the body of the snakes is kind of turning in such a way, and it's cylindrical and so on. Also, you can see, for example, here I'm already thinking about, okay, what's this plane here like that? So I can move, I can put the eye at this spot. Similar here, how is this structure of the snake? So if you want to see the structure, I have a structure plane sketch here, or where we can kind of overlap over this. And as you can see, let me quickly, because I drew in the same layer, which is a classic mistake over everyone. Pull this back, yep. And then we lower the opacity, and as you can see, this is the structure that I was talking about before, as in the whole character. So we have our planes, for example, for the face. Here, as we turn, like we have this turn, then we have the planes of the nose, right, how we have it. Then we have the balls of the eyes hidden behind, of course, the eyelids. So the more you kind of break down your sketches like that, the more you will understand where you need to put, let's say, stronger lines, or let's say more darker lines, because we're having these areas, for example, that they are overlapping here in these areas or here, compared to areas that are kind of in the light and so on. So the more you know about the different planes of either of the head or of the snakes, the better it would be for the sketch. And also when you go into painting, then the more you will be able to, like, from imagination, understand how you wanna, paint the snakes, right? Like if you wanna paint something where the light source is coming from above, then these planes will be, hitting the light, but these planes would not be hitting the light that much, so that you have to be darker and so on. This is how the thinking of planes continues. So having in mind this diagram here, I'm doing a final sketch with all my knowledge, which is ready to be painted. I'm not going to do line art in terms of, doing occlusion shadows on the line art or hatching for this one, because my intention is to paint it, right? My whole idea is I want to make sure my sketch has enough information for painting, which means I need my features down, I need the way that the hair are looking like snakes or their features, but I don't really need, for example, information like here there should be, a large shadow if the light hits from above, because if I do this hatching line here, then I will need to delete them at the painting phase, and that would mean that I need to do double work, right? So let's go to the next step. After this one, it's the flat colors. So what I chose here for flat colors was, first of all, before we do these differences and these color variations, let's go through the flat colors. So basically we have this color for the skin. Let me quickly here. Then we have two different colors for the snakes. Then I put a little bit of lipstick in here on her lips, just to enhance the fact that she's kind of, she tries to look good, so she can lure people in and then make them stone. And then of course just some indications for the tongue, and then a little bit of color in the let's say the small element of gold, and her eyes. So if you can see here, her eyes is the most saturated color compared to these colors, which are less saturated. And if you choose this color and this color, then you will see they are kind of in opposite areas, and this is more like on the blue area. So I kind of used her eyes as a color, complementary color compared to the other ones, which are more like in the analogous scheme. So they're all at the blues, right? So these three colors, if you see the color wheel on the right, they're kind of more at the blue areas, but her eyes is more like a warm color. Just I wanted her eyes to pop. So it's a small element which has this complementary saturated color, so you can have a, like, immediately pops out compared to the rest of the colors. So if we continue on that, then what I did next was I applied a soft light layer to create a little bit of color variation based on the zones of the head. So this zone, for example, it should be more yellowish. This should be, the zone should be more reddish, and finally this should be a little bit more to the blue, the zone. And this is what I applied with a soft light layer here on the right. As you can see, if I make it full opacity, then you are able to see the colors. For example, if I pick the colors here, you see it's more to the purple colors, then in the middle more to the red, and on the top more to the yellowish. And of course you need to adjust the saturation based on your way of thinking, or based on how you want to explore different colors. I have it around 30%, and if you pick normally, then you'll see there is a small difference in the colors, going to the blues, going to the reds. But still, in this area here, it's just the difference in this area is kind of making them more warm-ish or more cold-ish, right? Depending on the area of the face. So if we go forward with that, then we go to the next step, which is starting to apply shadows. And how I apply shadows is, first of all, I create a background. I don't want to be painting in white background, because that really is gonna make my values weird. So I'm gonna make sure that my character has at least one color background. So it's kind of, I'm imagining it here in a dark room or something like that. Usually I would pick something complementary again for the background. So if her whole, let's say, color palette is more to the blues, then the background is more like exactly the opposite, pretty much. And for shadows, I use this color here, as you can see in the color wheel, which is like purplish. I experimented a little bit with the actual background color. I didn't like it. I wanted more of this. And how I usually do shadows is I start by picking up this color and using a hard edge brush and just making all my shadows with hard edges. So if we just go and create another multiply layer. So I'm using multiply for the shadows. I'm gonna make sure that, okay, let's say if I wanna have a top, let's say this was the here for the shadows, for example, the light was coming from the top right. So we have a light coming from here, right? So if I'm gonna do shadows, I'm gonna make sure that first of all I establish the shadows for the cast shadows, like this. Then I'm gonna be doing a line where I see the shadows starting for the forehead, and then based on my diagram and wireframe that I showed you before, I'm gonna also continue with the shadows on the different features. So the whole idea is I want to make sure that everything that doesn't look at the light, right, it's in shadow. And then I'm going to create all the shadows by having very, very, very harsh edges. And when I'm done with the hard edges, okay, for example, this here, and when I'm done with these hard edges, let's say, for example, this edge here is not supposed to be hard, right? Then I'm gonna either get my smudge tool and smudge it, so there is a transition like this, or for example, this shadow here, I'm smudging it either horizontally as the plane changes, or vertically to the plane, okay? And I'm creating this kind of transitions where the shadows are not hard, they are more like form shadows. And when the shadows are kind of like here, for example, let's imagine that this actual hair is creating a cast shadow on her forehead. I'm not going to smudge it at all. I'm gonna leave it like that. Maybe I'm gonna make my brush very small and just smudge a little bit the edges, but depends on how far the shadow goes, right? So the final result of the shadows can be seen already here, but I can show you a very quick time lapse of this process for the shadows, where you will see me apply this starting from this phase and then applying them until we reach this phase. Alright, let's continue then after the time lapse, and we are gonna apply light now. So light is applied, I use a layer called overlay, which effectively what it does is kind of combines the values but makes values higher, and combines the underlying colors with the color that you're choosing as the light color. So as you can see, if I switch on and off, this is the whole light. A layer used overlay. The color that I used is this yellowish color that, as you can see in the color wheel. And what I do is similarly, I'm gonna pick this color, make sure I have enough knowledge on the planes of the head and on the planes that I have defined in the diagram as you saw before, and then start again with pretty much with all the planes that I think they are touching the light. Let me pick up my brush again with hard edge brush, and then go like that, and then make sure that my edges are smudged, so we have this transition of the lights to the darker areas, right? And using this match tool, I'm effectively trying to create gradients that they kind of show this curvedness of the face, right? This is what we are trying to create, curvedness of the face, because of course all of us, we are not built with planes in mind, right? We are not built like that. Like there's no plane here that changes and then there is hard transition. We have so many planes in our faces where the transition is kind of smooth. And that's why we are using the smudge tool to create this smooth transition. And of course, some areas is, for example, as we said, this area on the forehead, which actually, it's been hit by the light, or the cheek here, right? We're starting like this with the cheek, and then we smudge, slowly going down. So you can also use a bigger brush, the bigger brush the better. Thinking always about the planes, and of course, like that. So as you can see, slowly we are moving into this kind of creating transitions and making the face look 3D as the planes are moving away from the light. Of course, you want to have also in mind like that as we move down, the light will become less effective, and that means you want to apply less overlay into these areas, for example here, compared to these areas, or even these areas, or even these areas, right? These areas should have the highest values. You don't have to overdo it because the face, the distance of the face is not that big, but just have it in mind when you're trying to paint that usually, you will see more highlights here, less highlights here, less highlights here, almost less highlights here, just because you're kind of like moving down. If the light is coming from above, like as we move down, there would gonna be less light. All right, so this is the second step. We're gonna go again in a very small time lapse where you will see me doing this process, and we're gonna come back for the another step about shadows. Let's see the next step for shadows. The next step is called ambient occlusion, and let me flick this on and off, this layer. So as you can see, there are some darker shadows where I think the light will have a very hard time to go in, and that means it creates these hard shadows with much less light. So this is again a multiply layer on top of the other two layers. The color that I picked was again a similar purple one, and this created this effect. So this area is pretty much, we use exactly the same technique as before. We kind of gonna go in these areas here, or even in the mouths, where inside the mouth where the light is not able to, let's say, go that much in, or here, or even in this area here, right? Or the small area here, for example in the eyes where the planes of the eyelids are meeting. This is kind of the details you want to make sure you have there, or even this area here on the back. You want to make sure it's getting darker because the light cannot reach these areas. So this thinking about, again, in 3D, and how different objects overlap each other and create this kind of contact areas that we have for ambient occlusion. Again, I'm going to show you a little bit of time lapse on this, so you can see the process. Then we're gonna go right back into it. And let's continue. What I want to show you is, before we leave these three, let's say, phases, so the phase of the shadows, the light, and the ambient occlusion, is, as you can see, in the area of the teeth, I'm not making any detailed light and shadows. So I'm not gonna do, for example, if you say we pick the shadows from here, from this layer, I'm not gonna put shadows like that. We pick the correct one. I'm not gonna do this at all, because again, this will destroy the design of the teeth and makes teeth look weird. If I'm gonna try to put shadows everywhere, it's just gonna make them look weird. Instead, what you want to do is you want to have, again, a very, very smooth transition for teeth, starting from light hitting the teeth, right? And then eventually transitioning to the light here. So if you see, if I pick up the values from the left, they're kind of in the middle there, and then going just to the yellows on the teeth that are being hit by the light. So effectively, they are not white at all. I'm not using white, but I'm using high values, which means, you know, close to white, but transitioning from the blues to the yellows while going a little bit higher. And this gives the impression of we having a curvature in the teeth like that and like this. So this area, for example, in the teeth down here, will get all the light just because the light is coming like this, and then the rest would be in shadow. So this is what you want to do with the teeth, nothing else. And let's go to the next step, which is from this step that we have here, right, when we were stopped and added ambient occlusion and all the stuff. I'm merging everything together in a base layer, and now I'm gonna do what is called rendering, which I'm gonna try to go more into details in terms of planes. So having in mind that we have these planes, having this knowledge, I'm gonna make sure that I render in such a way that I reach this kind of curvature in the different areas. And what I mean by that render is that I'm going to make sure I do two things, right? I'm gonna make sure that lines are not visible anymore, at least as much as possible, or depending on the style, but also that the planes are defined in such a way that they interconnect with each other. For example, if you see here on the previous one, we have this snake, and if you just look, there's a very rough lines. They are not smudged at all. They are just, you know, this kind of painting lines, right, like this. And here we have something more smooth and good transitions. So what I do is, depending on the 3D planes of the object, I'm gonna make sure that I achieve this result. And how I do it is, if we start from this base, then I'm gonna pick the color, make sure if the transition is hard, push the transition. If the transition is not that hard, let's say I want to create a curvature here, this area, at this area here, I want to create a curvature. Then I'm going to pick this color, then with lower opacity, create another line, pick up this other color, and then do like that, another brush, and then pick the color, do it like this, pick the new color, do it like that, pick the new color, do it like that. And the more I pick and the more lines I do, I create this transition of colors like this. So if I pick here, there's a transition, a small transition of colors towards the dark, right? Which looks like a curved area. So if you want to make this, for example, if we want to look at a ball here, let's create a small ball here. Let's say if the base color we have for her face is like that, and here, and the shadow is like this, right? And the light we have put here is like this. Then I want to make sure I pick light, and then I do one, then I pick the next, and I do this, and then I pick again, and I brush lightly with opacity, and then I pick and I brush lightly with opacity, and then I pick and brush lightly with opacity, and I pick and do this, right? And then a transition gets created from these colors towards these colors, right? If we are talking about form shadows, this is the transition you want to have. If we're talking about cast shadows, there's no need to do transitions. You just want to make sure that the cast shadows remain sharp and they are not get mixed by your transitions. Now, the other thing that I do is to hide the lines. And as we go in, I'm going to try to, for example, pick this color, make it a little bit more darker and saturated, and then slightly go up here and paint on top, and then pick again and slightly paint and create a transition from this edge to this edge, right? And this is how I kind of paint on top of the lines. Or sometimes if they are like this here, I may completely delete them with an eraser. Okay, so this is the result. I'm gonna show you also time lapse again here on this whole process and how I do it. And then I'm gonna come back and let's continue with the next step of the process. Now the next stage is this. Of course, this is very intimidating now, right? So somehow we went from this to this, right? And the difference is, of course, the details on the snake skin. And how do we do these details? If you have seen my post on Instagram, I've shared this kind of slide with, let's say, the process, which explains the process of the snake. So first of all, when we are at this stage here, right? We are kind of in this stage here. We want to transition first on this stage, as we saw, and then we want to start establishing even smaller planes. So from this one here, again picking up a very hard edge brush, right? I want to make sure that I'm creating this kind of planes. Strong planes, like that, strong angles. The whole point is, even at the edges, they should be very strong, so they can give you the feeling that you actually have this kind of overlapping scales, right, on the snake. And as you can see, I'm picking up the color, creating a strong plane, and if I want to divide these two planes, now that I created, I'm going to pick this one, go a little bit darker and a little bit saturated, maybe change the hue just a little bit, right? And then create this plane. And as you can see, and why I did go darker here, because the plane is moving downwards, right, compared to the light. And then I have this plane here, and then this one, I'm going to pick this color again here, and then create another plane here, which is a little bit lighter, little bit. Do not go overboard with that. Just make sure you stay under the same, almost the same values, right? And we just created 3 planes. So make sure your planes are kind of either this kind of shape of triangles or squares or hexagonals, something with hard edges, so you can make sure you reach this stage. Then you want to do occlusion shadows on this. So on the planes that are actually touching each other, for example here, between these 2 planes, right, between these 2 planes, we want to create an occlusion shadow. So usually if the light is more like coming from this side, then I want to create an occlusion shadow here or here. So I'm going to pick this plane that is actually darker, and I'm going to move a lot darker. And then I'm going to make sure my opacity is controlled. So I'm going to make sure I do this, like almost a line, maybe a little bit of a triangle, and create this kind of effect. Then I pick this darker one, go darker, move the cursor a little bit to the blue, the circle outside, and then create these occlusion shadows. Where are the planes that they touch? So we are at this stage now, at this stage here. Then the final stage is creating a little bit of lights in the same planes. The light here are moving up, left, less saturation and more to the warm colors, and I'm just creating small things, especially in the corners, like lights. The same here, moving up, moving towards the warmer, less saturation, and I'm creating lights, right? And this is how you do it. Now, you don't want to create this feeling everywhere. You want to make sure you control it. As I say here, like, the whole idea is, this is a shadow area. This is a shadow area, and I don't want to create this feeling here, because it's gonna take the viewer away from the focus, move them towards the shadow areas, which I don't want to. And the second thing is, it doesn't create a 3D effect, right? It's just flattening the whole image. So I want to make sure I don't do it in these areas. In these areas, I'm going to make sure that I only have the impression of these planes and nothing else. So I want to make sure only the planes that are more into the light, or there's transition between the light and the shadows, for example, like this area here and the snake, this is where I want this effect to be prominent, not in the other areas. So having in mind that, let's go to the time lapse. Let's see how we get from, Let's see, how do we go from here to here? Okay, and we're gonna be back in just a few moments. So I hope you enjoyed the time lapse, and we are almost there. I promise. We have our snakes. Now it's all about the smaller details, and that means about eyes and this gold earring here. Effectively, what you need to do about gold is, if you are now at this stage, you want to make sure you start with a dark yellow color. As you can see here, it's very dark. You want to make sure you kind of use the selection tool to your advantage, so you can have hard shadows. Usually man-made objects like necklaces or stuff have hard shadows, but it depends of course on the object. But I wanted to have hard shadows here, so you just make sure you have this flat color everywhere. And based on the light, you're trying to create reflections on the light. So what you want to do is, let's say, imagine this as a 3D form. We want to make sure we have shadows that are almost too black. For example, let's say this has a plane here, or another plane that looks at the shadow, or similar planes here, for example, and this creates this 3D form. And then let's see, this area is kind of hitting the light, so I'm gonna pick this color, move closer to yellow and very high, and then make kind of reflections. Let's say there are some lights that are reflecting here or here in this areas, for example, like that. Maybe they are straight lights or something like this, or beams or something like that. And then even go a little bit almost to the white, and then move again my cursor, and then just make the small streaks, or even in the corners here that they are changing, or make this kind of thing. And this will give you the impression of something being gold. This is very easy. You just move from darkness to light, but in big jumps, so you can create contrast that gold gives you. That's on the gold. And the eyes is, you want to make sure to think about the eyes and about the iris in terms of a few things. One is that the iris here is a cone, and the pupil is inside the cone, but not touching the, let's say, the outside. So the pupil is not touching here, so it's not a touch above the eye, but it's inside there, right? So this is where you want to put it. Then you want to make sure you render it opposite to the light. So if the light is coming from above, then the whole shadow, because the iris is like an inverted cone, you want to make sure all these planes are in the shadow, and then these planes are in the light. And this is what you do, nothing else here for the iris. And the second thing is, you want to make sure that you clean up your eyelids. So this areas here, right, the eyelids, this eyelid should be in the light, and this eyelids should be in the shadow. If you want to go more realistic, as I did here, is you have to know that the eyelids are having two planes, right? One plane looking at the light and one plane looking down, and this is exactly the same for this one. It has two planes like this. So if I open now the other image, you'll see me that I did exactly that, right? So the highlight is here, which means the light is coming from here, but you see this area is more darker compared to this area, because I rendered it opposite to the light. And also the pupil is not like this, it's not here, it's more towards inside, okay? So it's looking more like it's inside the eye. This is all about the eyes. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about the eyes in the video that I'm preparing for the face features, but for you, this is some quick tips on how you can, think when you're rendering eyes. Of course, there is the only cast shadow is the cast shadow that is coming from the upper eyelid. This you need to make sure you keep it, the edge you keep it hard and not smudge it, but all the other edges should be smooth. And another thing that I have seen is that many beginner artists are doing incorrectly is that they kind of choose white color for the eyes and they don't render them at all. As you can see here, I'm starting from this kind of high value and then going again back to darker values. Why? Simply because the eye is a ball, and of course I have to make sure that as we go down, the ball, it's becoming darker, right? Because the light is coming from this side. So as we go down, the ball is becoming darker. That's why this value here is higher and this value is lower and more to the blues. All right. So this is all about the details. I did also kind of quick clean up on the teeth, but effectively, as you can see, it's the same. The only thing I added was some highlights on the teeth, like in this area, for example, in this teeth, just to create a little bit more of a focus. Or this one is just how the teeth is rendering, rounding here. I just created a highlight on the change of the plane, right? If you imagine that the teeth are kind of round objects inside the mouth. And that's it for details. So after this point, I'm just merging everything together and creating a new layer where I do some post-processing. For example, I'm gonna add some effects like this ones, right? Which is the kind of a moving effect of the eyes of the snakes. This was done mainly with color, normal layer and then color dots, the same color. So if you see, the color of the normal layer is a very saturated orange, mostly based on the eyes of the snakes. And then I did exactly the same color on top of it, and same layer on top of it, but as a color dots, where I created this kind of lighting effect. So it's visible. So that's the difference. So if you just hide this color dots layer, you see it's much more subtle than with the color dots. It's kind of popping the colors and so on. Finally, we are going into what I call post-processing. For me is, I don't do that much. I just duplicate the layer and then do a filter. Let me show you. This is a filter that just makes a little bit the whole painting more sharp. How I do that is I duplicate this merged down layer, then I create a filter of edge detection. I'm choosing this Gaussian high pass, and then I'm moving the radius to maybe 7, 8, right? Depending on how important it is for you to see all the edges or some of the edges. We can barely see here eyes and teeth. I think that's fine. And I press OK. And then I change this layer into a soft light layer, usually, or it may be overlaid sometimes. And what it just creates is a little bit of sharpness in different areas, just to make it a little bit more pop. Sometimes another post-processing thing that I do, which I haven't done here because it wasn't needed, is I'm gonna switch to grayscale mode. This is, you can do in Krita. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. I can show you how you do this, and how you bind it also into a shortcut key. I've bind this into Shift Q, so you can check your values. And what you do usually is you want to zoom out a lot and check your values and see, okay, is there enough contrast in my painting so it can be seen from very far? Because in today's social media, people are seeing the paintings for just a few seconds in very small screens, so you need to make sure your paintings that they're popping if you want them to be successful. So as you can see here, it's not needed, but what you can do several times is you can use a levels layer. And if you don't have enough for contrast, then you can play around with this layer and create more contrast, right? Like you see almost black and white, this kind of thing. And then, of course, the more contrast you create in different areas, the more it will, move the audience to look at these areas. So this is the post-processing steps, and effectively this is the whole process of creating such a character. Together with the rendering and painting process. I really hope you liked that video, guys. Let me know in the comments if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't. And of course, as always, see you in the next video with more tutorials.